Hi everyone. So this is the first worked example of this session, and we will be working on problem 21 of chapter 3. Um, this one will require the file PO2 underscore 07, and that's actually a file from chapter 2. So please open up the file. And the problem is printed on page 104. And please read the problem, open up the file, and you will notice that there are three parts to this problem. The first part is to create a table of correlation. Second part is to create scatter plots. The third part is to create trend line or linear trend line. So let's tackle the first one. So let's just take a look at this table or this file. So this is an employee file, and it's indexed by the first column, so employee number. So there are 205 employees, and each employee is recorded using 6 categories: gender, age, prior experience, beta experience, education, and annual salary. The part A asks us to create a correlation table among the 5 categories or 5 variables: age, prior experience, beta experience, education, and annual salary. So in order to do that, so basically we will have a correlation table that shows the correlation between any of the 2 variables. So for example, a correlation between age and education, a correlation between beta experience and prior experience, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in order to create a table like this, then we want a table. So the table will be very similar to the one that you see in figure 3.18 or on page 103. So we want to list all the variables horizontally and vertically, and all the correlation values will be displayed in the middle at the intersection. So in order to do that, the best way is to first create range names. So we want range names of age, prior experience, beta experience, education, and annual salary. Before we do that, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping here, because range names, Excel range names, only accept letters, numbers, and underscores. So it will always turn space into underscores. So in order to keep the integrity of the range names, especially when I copy the labels, then I'm going to change all of the spaces in the labels into underscores, so we won't run into trouble later on. So I'm going to change the space in prior experience to underscore, like that. And I'm going to change the space of beta experience to underscore, like this. And then there's one more space in annual salary. So now I've done that. Then the next thing is just to name column C through G using the label. So in order to select all of those columns or all of those values, then I'm going to select first from C1 all the way to G1, and then I want to select every record in this file. So in order to select that, you can drag it all the way down, or there's a quick keyboard shortcut. Then you just press down on Control and Shift, and then you hit the down arrow. Then it will help you select everything. So once you select everything, then you click on Create, go to Formulas, click on Create from Selection, and make sure that the top row is checked as to create names from values in the range. So you're telling Excel that you're using the values in the top row to name this whole column. That's all. So once you click OK, then it's done. You don't see anything, but the naming is done. If you want to make sure, you can always go to Formulas bar and then click on Name Manager, and then see all the names are listed and the range and so on. Okay, so now that we've done that, then let's add let's put the correlation table in a different on a different spreadsheet. Actually, we can put it on here, so it's actually easier. It's actually quicker because we can see everything here. So let me get rid of the first 2 columns. So I'm displaying these 5 columns, and I'm going to put the correlation table right here. Okay, from J7. So I'm just going to copy the labels from C1 to G1. I'm going to copy it. So you can go to home and then use copy, or I always do Control C. That's very quick. So I'm going to Control C, copy it. And I'm going to put the J, click on J7, and then I'm going to just put the labels here. But I'm not going to directly put the labels here because I want to make sure I don't copy the comments. You see that there's a little red triangle in every cell. It explains the what this label means. I don't want that. I only want the values. So what I do is that I will right click here, and I'm going to select the value. So that's the second one. I'm just going to select the values. Okay, and then I'm going to also copy the labels down from I8. So I'm going to copy age, prior experience, beta experience, education, annual salary from here, so I can get the table set up. So how would I be able to do that? Well, I do the same thing. I right click, and I'm going to paste special instead of just clicking on the values. But I'm still selecting values, but this time I'm going to copy in a transposed fashion. I'm going to click OK. Then you see that everything is copied down. So first of all, let me expand this column a little bigger, so it shows all of these labels. And I'm going to expand all these rows a little bigger, so I will show all the labels here. I'm just going to use this one to the prior experience because this is the longest label. So I'm going to use this to give me the minimal. Okay, the minimal column width, display everything. Let me shrink this one a little bit so that I can always show better everything. Okay, so now I'm going to align these. Well, the formatting is not critical, but it always helps because all the numbers will be aligned to the right. So I'm going to align all the labels to the right also, and I'm going to align all these labels to the right so everything looks nicer. So now I can start putting in the correlations. So the correlation takes the function. Let's say I'm just going to click K10. I'm going to use that as an example. So how do I calculate the correlation here? So I'm going to do the correlation function, right? So that's the correl. And I'm going to do the correlation between the prior experience and beta experience. So basically what I'll do is to get all of these values to correlate with the values in D. But all these values are named. So all I have to do is to call up the names. So I'm just going to have to do prior experience, and I start typing, and Excel gives me the match. I'm going to double click it. And then the next one will be the beta experience, right? So it gives me the match. I'm going to double click that. So that will give me the correlation. Okay, so that is the correlation. Great. But how would I, but I have to do that for every cell. That's a little hard. So how would I be able to automate this process? Meaning that I'll just use the label in K. So whenever I select, like this cell, I'll just use the label on top and the label to the left as the range name, and then the correlation function will take care of that. Then in order to do that, then we have to use what we call the indirect function. So the indirect function takes an argument and then turn that argument into a text string and use that and output a text string for another function as another function as another function's argument. So that sounds a little complicated. So let me illustrate what this is. So instead of doing the correlation and then put in the names, I can actually doing the correlation here like this, correlation function, and then if I put in the indirect, okay, indirect function. So what happened here? So I want to use K7 as the range for as the first argument of correlation, but I can't really just click K7 in the correlation as the argument for correlation function, because the correlation function will just take K7, one cell, as the first argument of correlation function. But if I use the indirect function and I use K7 here, okay, then I will get, so what would I get? I will get the value of K7 as the output of the indirect function. So now you will see correlation of correlation of prior experience as the first argument. And then I do another indirect function, and I use I11 as the argument for the second indirect function. So the output of the second indirect function will be the word education. And when Excel sees this whole statement, then Excel will say, okay, so it's a correlation between the output of the first indirect function, which will be prior experience, right? So the content of K7, and also the output of the second indirect function, which is the content of I11 or education. So this means it's the correlation between the variable prior experience and the variable education, and it will create the right correlation. So now if you press enter, then I think I have too many. Yeah, see here I have too many parentheses. So I'm just going to correct that. Okay, so now it's correct. Sometimes I make typos a lot. So this will make everything a lot easier. Okay, so let me delete these. So let me just enter one indirect function, one correlation function here, and then I can copy it down. So I'm going to do correlation and then indirect, and I'm going to select J7. Okay, I'm going to close it, but notice that when I want to copy it across or copy it down, I always want to use the one. When I use the one on top, I want to keep the row value the same, right? So which means that I want to move, when I copy across, I want to change the column number but not the row number. So in this one, when I refer to J7, when I move across, I want K7, L7, and so on. So I always want to keep the row number, but I'll change the column number. So I'll keep the row number absolute, but column number relative. So I'm going to change that, put the dollar sign in front of 7. So I'm going to do this one like this. And then the second indirect function will refer to I8, but here I want to always keep the column name I fixed, but I'm going to change the row if I copy it down. So I am going to change the reference to $I8. Close it and close it again, so I get the first correlation. Of course, the correlation between the same two variable, the same variable will be 1 always. So now I can just copy it across and down easily. So all the correlation will be created like this. And then I'm going to reduce the decimal places. Usually we keep like 4 decimal places for correlation, or 3. So now the correlation is done, and then we just have to select. So we just have to see which ones are the largest. Of course, the diagonal is always 1, and usually what I do is that to get rid of one part, because you see that they're symmetrical. Because of course it's age, prior experience right here, and this one is prior experience and age, so it will be the same. So I usually get rid of one side so that I won't be confused like this. So I'm going to just highlight these parts. You don't have to do that. This is completely optional. That just helps me personally. Okay. So now I have all these numbers, and then I can see which one will be the biggest. So for instance, if I want to know the correlation between the largest correlation with the annual salary, you can easily tell is the beta experience. Okay. Or if you have a lot of different variables, then one of the ways to do that is just to highlight all these. You don't want the annual salary correlation. So highlight all that. If you have a lot, then you go to conditional formatting, you select top and bottom rules, and then you select the first one. So for instance, you select number 1. So this will tell you the biggest. So the biggest is beta experience. Okay, so now Let's move on to part two. So part two, or part B, is to create scatter plot between annual salary and each of age, prior experience, beta experience, and education. In fact, the part C asks to create the linear trend line of the of for the one that has the largest correlation with annual salary. So in part B, we're supposed to create 4 scatter plots, but the process is exactly the same. So I'm just going to create one. I'm just going to create the scatter plot of the one that has the correlation, had highest correlation between with annual salary. So that will be the beta experience, and then I'm just going to create a trend line for that. Okay, so I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to do the scatter plot between beta experience and annual salary. So in order to do that, then you want to select column E and column G at the same time, right? So the way to do that is actually you can always do column E, and then you scroll all the way down, and then you press down on the control key. So let me show you. So you do this one, you press down on the control key, and then you press on shift and control, and then you press the down arrow, and the next thing you do is go back, and then you press down on control key, click on G1, and then now you have to move all the way down to the end of this table, and then press down on the shift key, and then click on G205. Then you're selecting 2 columns like that. So there are many different ways to do that. These are just some of the things I do to make life a little easier. But in order to create the plots, create a chart of 2 columns that are not adjacent to one another, then you have to select each one separately. So whenever you want to select non-adjacent cells or ranges, the key to press down is always control. If you want to select adjacent cells, then it's always shift. Okay, so now let's go to insert, and then the scatter plots, and then I'm going to select the first one. Okay, so that is just that. That's as easy as simple as it gets. So you just have to go to scatter plots. You select one of the scatter plots you want. You can change the styles and everything. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to make it a little larger here. Okay, and then what I'll do is that so this is the scatter plot of annual salary versus beta experience. You see that whenever we create a scatter plot, the output variable, or the dependent variable, which we'll discuss later, will always be in the y-axis, and then the independent variable will always be in the x-axis. So here I want to see the effect of beta experience on annual salary. So the annual salary is a dependent variable, and the beta experience as an independent variable. So you can see that it trends up this way. So there's likely a positive correlation, and then that's actually verified in the correlation table. So you can do the scatter plots of the other 3 variables in pretty much the same way. So the last thing I'll show is to do the trend line. The trend line is pretty easy, so I want to leave it some room. So I'm going to because a sidebar will come up. So in order to start the trend line, you just move your cursor to any of the dots, right click, and then select add trend line. So that's the second to last item. And the sidebar comes up and asks you what to do. You want an exponential trend line, linear trend line, or so on. So first, this part is a linear trend line. We're going to keep a linear trend line. Okay, and you can change the style and so on, by doing let's see, you can change the style later, but at the bottom I also want to display the equation on chart. So those are the 2 things I want, and I'm going to change the style a little bit. So I want the width to be a little bigger. Oh, it's now smaller actually. So I want the width to be a little bigger, and I want the type to be a solid line, and then I want a different color. I want a Well, let's say I want red. Okay, so that makes everything a little clearer. And so that's it. So I can get a trend line here. It's y equals to, let's see, can I read that? I guess it's 8263.3 x plus something. Okay, so basically, so it tells me if I want to approximate a linear relationship between these two variables, then the annual salary is a coefficient multiplied by the beta experience plus the intercept. We will go back to this point when we talk about linear regression in a later session. I believe it's session 3, but this gives us a pretty good starting point to understand the relationship between two variables using correlation and scatter plot.